66 million years ago, the age of dinosaurs ended in a single, violent moment. But not every dinosaur died that day. The impact itself was only the beginning. What followed was slower. Fire, darkness, cold, hunger, and collapsing food chains. Earth's strongest animals had survived for millions of years. Then their world changed. Strength was no longer enough. From the ruins, a different world began to rise. Ours. To understand that transformation, we must return to the Cretaceous period's final hours, a time when the world still belonged to giants. This was not a dying planet. It was a living, complex Earth, filled with ecosystems that had developed over immense stretches of time. Across western North America, Triceratops moved through forests and open floodplains, cutting through vegetation with powerful beaks. Hadrosaurs traveled in groups, feeding on the plants that covered the lowlands. Armored dinosaurs carried heavy plates and clubs built to discourage even the most determined attacker. Beyond the trees, Tyrannosaurus rex followed the scent of prey or a fresh kill. Elsewhere, on other continents, entirely different communities had evolved. Long-necked titanosaurs crossed southern landscapes. Predatory dinosaurs hunted beneath unfamiliar constellations. Pterosaurs crossed the skies, while early birds moved through dense forests. Those forests already bloomed with flowers and insects. The oceans held giants of their own. Mosasaurs patrolled the seas. Ammonites drifted below. Invisible plankton sustained them all. These microscopic organisms supported food webs, reaching all the way to enormous marine predators. Mammals were already present, diverse and active, not merely waiting for dinosaurs to vanish. Some climbed, some burrowed, and others ate insects, plants, or smaller animals. A few mammalian groups had already developed surprisingly specialized diets and bodies. But on land, dinosaurs occupied many of the largest and most powerful ecological roles. They had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for more than 150 million years. To any creature alive that morning, their world would have appeared permanent. But permanence is an illusion created by a life too short to witness geological time. Far beyond the atmosphere, an asteroid was approaching Earth. Its full journey remains uncertain, but evidence preserved in boundary rocks reveals what kind of object it probably was. It was likely a carbon-rich asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers across. On a human scale, that size is almost impossible to comprehend. Compared with Earth, it was only a fragment. But that fragment was enough. As it closed in, gravity accelerated it. The atmosphere ahead compressed and burned. The object became a brilliant, expanding fireball moving faster than any animal could react. Below, life continued. Animals fed. Rivers moved toward the sea. Insects passed between flowers. Predators searched for opportunities that had governed their behavior for generations. None understood the growing light above. Their instincts recognized teeth, claws, scent, and sound. But nothing in their evolution prepared them for an object arriving from space. The asteroid was descending toward a shallow sea near what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Then it struck. For the organisms closest to the impact, was no long extinction. There was only an instant. The collision forced water and rock outward with unimaginable violence. The asteroid and the rock beneath it were partly vaporized on impact. Other material melted, shattered, and blasted high above the surface. A crater roughly 180 to 200 kilometers wide began forming beneath the devastation. The ground moved like something fluid. Shock waves traveled through the crust. Earthquakes spread far beyond the impact zone. Across the Gulf, seawater surged violently. Enormous waves struck coastlines and carried debris deep inland. But the crater was only the center of the catastrophe. The collision launched vast quantities of shattered rock into the atmosphere. Some fragments followed high arcs above Earth before falling back toward the surface. As this debris returned at extreme speed, it superheated the atmosphere. How much burned immediately remains debated, though geology preserves evidence of widespread fires. But the destruction was probably uneven. Some regions experienced intense heat and burning. Others were damaged later by the climatic effects that followed. This distinction matters. The end of the dinosaurs was not one wall of flame moving across an identical world. It was a chain of disasters, each reaching different ecosystems in different ways. Near the impact, destruction came through heat, pressure, earthquakes, and water. Farther away, the first warning may have been trembling ground and a darkening horizon. Then came falling debris, changing skies, and an atmosphere that turned hostile. The asteroid struck carbonate and sulfur-rich rocks, blasting dust and aerosols upward. Soot and sulfur-rich material filled the sky. Some particles fell quickly. Others remained above the weather systems that might otherwise have washed them away. Sunlight reaching the surface began to weaken. The blue sky faded behind a spreading veil. Day faded toward twilight. This may have been the most lethal stage of all. A Tyrannosaurus could survive injury. A Triceratops could fight off a predator. A giant herbivore could walk for days in search of water. But no animal could fight the atmosphere. As sunlight disappeared, photosynthesis declined. Plants require light to convert energy into living tissue. In the oceans, microscopic photosynthetic organisms perform the same essential function. These microorganisms formed the foundation of marine life. When that foundation weakened, everything above it faltered. Food webs began collapsing. The first days after impact were filled with confusion. Some animals died immediately. Others survived in landscapes they still recognized. Familiar trees, rivers, nesting grounds, and migration routes were still there for a moment. But those landscapes were changing. Leaves were damaged. Temperatures fell. Seasonal patterns became meaningless. The plants that survived the initial shock could no longer grow normally beneath the darkened sky. Large herbivores required enormous amounts of food, even in healthy ecosystems. As vegetation vanished, their constant energy needs turned size from advantage into burden. The animals may have searched wider territories, consuming whatever remained. But every surviving herbivore was competing for a shrinking resource. predators faced a delayed version of the same crisis. At first, death created temporary abundance. Carcasses lay across damaged landscapes. Scavengers may have found more food than they could consume. But the feast could not last. Living prey stopped reproducing and began to weaken. As prey disappeared, hunters followed. Even Tyrannosaurus depended on a functioning ecosystem. Its jaws could crush bone. Its senses could locate prey across its environment. But evolution had shaped it for a functioning Cretaceous ecosystem. It could not hunt animals that no longer existed. In the oceans, the same collapse began near the smallest levels of life. Reduced sunlight devastated photosynthetic plankton, the base of many marine food chains. Their decline starved other organisms. The damage climbed upward, and ammonites disappeared. The great marine reptiles disappeared. Many forms of plankton vanished from the fossil record. The catastrophe did not select only the largest animals, and small size was not a guarantee of survival. Entire groups of mammals, birds, reptiles, plants, and insects were also lost. By the time the crisis ended, an estimated 3/4 of Earth's species had disappeared. Extinction was uneven. Some organisms carried traits that unexpectedly improved their chances. Not because evolution anticipated an asteroid, but because ordinary adaptations became extraordinary advantages. But because adaptations developed for ordinary life became useful in an extraordinary disaster. A small body required less energy. The ability to burrow offered protection from sudden heat and environmental extremes. A flexible diet allowed an animal to consume foods that specialists ignored. Seeds, roots, insects, decaying matter, and freshwater resources remained available longer. They endured after green leaves and open ocean food webs had largely failed. There was no single formula for survival. Crocodilian relatives endured. Many other large reptiles vanished, while turtles survived. Amphibians crossed the boundary. Some fish and freshwater organisms persisted. Certain mammals survived, even as many mammal species vanished. And one lineage of dinosaurs survived as well. Birds. The asteroid did not erase every dinosaur. It ended the world of the non-avian dinosaurs, the immense terrestrial forms that had dominated the public image of prehistory. Avian dinosaurs crossed the boundary, carrying part of the ancient world forward. Every bird alive today belongs to that unbroken surviving lineage. Here lies a great reversal. The dinosaurs are not entirely gone. They are outside our windows. But for survivors on the ground, the crisis continued. There was no sudden ending. The darkness did not lift like a curtain. Dust, soot, and aerosols reshaped the climate. Temperatures fell across the planet. An impact winter followed, varying in severity and duration by region and scientific model. Rain carried material back toward the surface. The oceans absorbed chemical changes. Damaged ecosystems struggled to rebuild with fewer species and broken connections. For a time, large regions of Earth may have seemed almost empty. Yet emptiness in nature is rarely complete. In disturbed landscapes, organisms able to reproduce quickly can become the first signs of recovery. The fossil record contains a striking signal sometimes called The fern spike. In several regions, fern spores became unusually abundant after the impact. Ferns thrive on damaged ground, spreading rapidly by spores across open landscapes. They colonized areas where forests had vanished, though the old world had not returned. It meant a new ecological process had begun. First came the opportunists. Next came more complex plant communities. Food webs began slowly rebuilding. They were not copies of the old world, but new networks assembled from survivors. This recovery took time. The asteroid struck in a moment. Rebuilding a biosphere required far longer. Forests returned unevenly. Marine ecosystems reorganized. New species appeared while surviving lineages expanded into environments where competitors and predators had vanished. Mammals benefited, but the idea that they had been insignificant before impact is misleading. They were not simply released overnight by the asteroid. Mammals had lived beside dinosaurs for well over 100 million years. Some had already evolved specialized teeth, diets, and behaviors before the impact. Mammalian history did not begin in Chicxulub's ashes. Survival still came at a cost. Many mammal species vanished at the boundary. The survivors paid a heavy price. But they entered a world filled with vacant ecological space and fewer large competitors. Former food sources, habitats, and ways of life could now be occupied by different bodies. Over millions of years, mammal groups expanded into new forms and niches. They diversified in size, diet, movement, and behavior. Some stayed small, others became larger. Some returned to the trees. Some became powerful ground dwellers. Much later, some mammals returned to the oceans and evolved into whales. The link between extinction and modern mammal diversification remains scientifically complex. Some important mammalian branches began before the impact, while other expansions and ecological transformations occurred afterward. The asteroid did not create mammals. It changed the world in which mammalian evolution continued. And much later, among the many branches of that history, primates appeared. There was nothing inevitable about this. The impact was not aimed at producing intelligence. Evolution was not moving toward humanity as a final destination. Had the asteroid missed, dinosaurs might have kept evolving, and mammals too. They may have occupied different roles, producing ecosystems unlike anything alive today. Even after the impact, countless events could have redirected the future. Climate changed, continents moved, climates shifted, species competed, migrated, adapted, diversified, and vanished. Every surviving lineage passed through its own sequence of accidents and pressures. Eventually, one primate branch learned to walk upright and shape tools. It developed complex language and the ability to preserve knowledge beyond one lifetime. Much later, its descendants learned to read the rocks.
Notice the isotopic shift in the clay layer.
They found a thin layer enriched with an element rare in Earth's crust, but more common in meteorites. They discovered shocked minerals created under extreme pressure. They mapped a buried crater beneath the Yucatan Peninsula.
Unmistakable.
And from these fragments, they reconstructed a disaster no human had witnessed. Us. The creatures whose distant evolutionary history was shaped by the empty ecological spaces left after the extinction. But we should be careful with that conclusion. The asteroid was not the first chapter of humanity. It was one turning point among many. It did not guarantee our arrival. It only changed what was possible. That may be the event's deepest meaning. The last day of the dinosaurs was not merely the death of powerful animals. It was the collapse of an entire system that had once seemed permanent. Size did not save it. Strength did not save it. Millions of years of dominance did not save it. Survival belonged to scattered organisms whose bodies and behaviors happened to endure. Evolution had never prepared them for this world. Yet from them came the next Earth, a planet of recovering forests, changing oceans, living dinosaurs in the sky. Mammals entered roles once closed to them. The old world vanished, but not without leaving traces. It remains beneath us, in fossils, crater rocks, boundary clay, ancient spores, and the living bodies of birds. It also remains in the structure of the world we inherited. The Chicxulub impact was among life's darkest events. It destroyed entire ecosystems. It erased evolutionary lineages and closed a chapter lasting over 150 million years. But extinction is not emptiness. It is transformation. The asteroid did not begin our story, but it changed the planet on which that story could eventually be written. And so the last day of the dinosaurs was not the end of life. Instead, it marked the beginning of an entirely different Earth.